I believe Secretary Ross is here. Welcome. It's good to see you again.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Chairman Bloom and members. I wanted to start first off by thanking you for your support last year and the support of the legislature for some of the budget changes that were made to help our department. Specifically, there was a very important allocation and language provided to keep our animal health lab. Modern state-of-the-art technology. This is a very important facility for our animal health branch, as it provides comprehensive surveillance so that we can rapidly respond and keep the spread of animal diseases from happening. But also, I especially wanted to acknowledge the legislature's support for the fairs last year. There was $7 million provided for maintenance. Those facilities, like many state facilities, are in desperate need of upgrades and maintenance, and a lot of public health and safety issues have been addressed with that funding, so I want to thank you for that. There was also $3 million provided for ongoing training. We've had significant turnover of our fair boards, and the importance of that local leadership as we have lost the general fund support for fairs to be able to reconnect with their local communities and make sure that they're providing relevant and cost-effective services to the community to continue the cultural diversity of their entertainment as well as a venue for agriculture, but also most of our fairs at one point or another serve as a hub for emergency services. So I wanted to start off by saying thank you for that. For the 16-17 proposed budget, I'll touch on some of our priorities. Our budget, as proposed by the governor's budget, is $485 million, including capital outlay. What's significant about the change in our budget over the last 5 years is that at one point it was about a third industry funded through assessment programs, 1/3 general fund, and 1/3 cooperative agreements from the federal government. Our budget now stands at only $85 million from the general fund. Industry stakeholders have stepped up with assessments for those programs that they put priority on, and we have been successful, although I don't always count on that as a permanent fix, of negotiating with the federal government for the programs that need cooperative agreements. There are several budget change proposals, one for our animal health division. Last year, we were the second state that had an outbreak of high pathogenic avian influenza. The first one was in Oregon in mid-December, and then we were next with several houses that were infected in the Central Valley. It's a credit to the department and its staff that we were able to quickly identify that, respond, and mitigate the spread of that. What's interesting is that we now know, because of where the incidents happened, or also some on the West Coast in Washington, is that we know that this bacteria is in the Pacific Flyway. And so we have to carefully monitor that, make sure that our biosecurity measures are the best they can be, and maintain our ability to quickly respond. We also saw last year 20 states in the Midwest where there's a high population of turkeys, broilers, and laying hens. 20 states had infestations. We lost about 14% of the total poultry flocks in the country. This is how quickly it can spread if you don't have good surveillance, the ability to respond. So we have a slight adjustment in our budget of $192,000 in general fund authority and $167,000 ongoing for the Animal Health and Food Safety Services Division to make sure that they're constantly planning, staying on top of that, and getting ahead of this really frightening situation. We've also faced, with our warmer winters that have been happening back to back, every kind of pest infestation that you can imagine. It's a tribute to our economy that it has bounced back, which means more cargoes coming into the state. We have multiple points of entry, but we also are seeing increased movement of food and nursery stock throughout the state, which can be an artificial carrier of pests. And so our programs have been stretched to the limit, but the one that is most worrisome for all of us is the continued spread of the Asian citrus psyllid, which spreads Wanglong Bing, which kills citrus trees. Florida just 3 weeks ago announced that since they've had the infestation of Wanglong Bing, they've lost 71% of their productivity. There's a lot of research that's occurring, but what's most important in our program is that we continue to work with the federal government and the citrus industry and our agricultural commissioners to try to stop the spread of the pest so that it's not vectoring the disease that kills the trees. We've had similar experiences and successes in the wine grape and grape sector with the Pierce's disease, which is vectored by glassy-winged sharpshooter. But the warmer temperatures back-to-back in our winters really has allowed this pest population to continue to survive much more strongly than I wish that it would. So this year we are asking for $1 million in Ag Fund Authority for 16-17 and for 17-18 to enhance this program and to make sure that we've got the funds to respond and keep the population suppressed as much as we possibly can. Currently, although we hope that with the first down payment on a miracle March this past week, facing the 5th year of a drought, we also have a request for $200,000 in one-time general fund authority to continue our work with the University of California, Davis to do the satellite imagery work and then calculate how much acreage is being fallowed and where the biggest impacts will be to local communities. The work of that economic impact report has really helped the drought task force over these last 4 years to be able to identify those most impacted communities to then provide social services where they're needed, and it has been a valuable tool. I would suggest that even if we get to a normal moisture year this year, what we've learned from this drought has been invaluable in planning for future droughts that we know that will happen. We don't want to lose the lessons learned, and the work of this particular study, I think, has been a valuable tool for all of us. With respect to FAIRS funding, a total of $4.3 million has been included for continued statewide deferred maintenance work. This is provided in the control section that may be allocated to the Department of Finance and then go to CDFA as part of a larger statewide effort to address our aging infrastructure needs. Of this total, $4 million will be allocated to the network of FAIRS and $300,000 to CDFA to do its continuing oversight and training of directors. Last year, we had several significant pieces of legislation that have required us to request some budget change proposals. The first one, we are part of the comprehensive medical marijuana regulatory system. Under that act, the Department of Food and Agriculture is charged with establishing a medical cannabis cultivation program where we would license, inspect, and enforce the requirements of that program. We will be concurrently, over the next 2 years, we will be the lead agency for a programmatic environmental impact report and designing the very complex regulations that will make that program effective in January of 2018. We also are charged with working with the other agencies that are involved in this program with establishing a track and trace database so that we can put all of this licensing information into a database so that we can track the seed all the way to the end product that goes into the stream of commerce. Our request for that is a budget that allocates $3.2 million in reimbursement authority and 5.5 positions in 15-16 and $3.3 million from the Medical Marijuana Regulatory Fund authority and 18 positions in 16-17 and ongoing to implement the legislation. We have already met the timelines that we've established for ourselves. We just last week, our first ever branch chief for this program started. We are now staffing up. We have a new IT director at the agency who has already met with her counterparts from across government. So I think we're off to a good start of being able to meet those very aggressive timelines that we're required to meet. Also last year, the legislature passed and the governor signed SB 27, which is an important piece of legislation to address antimicrobial resistance. This is legislation that would establish limits on the use of antimicrobials of human significance that are used in livestock, putting limitations on the access to those drugs by prescription through veterinarians. And in this effort, there will also be considerable work invested in establishing stewardship practices to really make sure that we're doing the education, outreach, and training to limit this use for the most judicious, important uses of these very important drugs. This program also has 2 years to take effect. There will be very complicated regulations to put that in place and a lot of stakeholder outreach. This is an issue of great importance to public health and safety in addition to the continued success of our livestock sector here. We'll be working with the veterinary community as well as the medical community on this. We've requested $1.3 million in general fund authority for 16-17 and $1.3 million for ongoing authority for 8 positions. There is also legislation that passed the Voluntary Contribution Fund to distribute grants to animal control agencies and shelters that support spay and neuter activities that prevent animal homelessness and cruelty. The request is for $194,000. Finally, to touch on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund programs that have been proposed for the Department of Food and Agriculture, $20 million has been proposed to continue the department's very successful State Water Efficiency and Enhancement Program. That program was established 2 years ago with leadership from the governor and the legislative body to address drought needs. This has established a successful program for on-farm water use efficiency that will conserve water, reduce energy use, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We have in the budget a proposal to continue that program for $20 million. We also have $35 million that would be allocated to continue the dairy digester research and development program that was first established in 2014. We know by the draft report that has already been released by the Air Board that we need to put continued emphasis on reducing short-lived climate pollutants. Methane is one of those, and with a large number of dairy cows in the state, we believe there's great potential to expand the dairy digester technology that has already been deployed, and especially with the new research and fundings that have been here to really send a signal of the importance of what dairy digesters can do with developing low-carbon transportation fuels in addition to alternative electricity. So that, I think, is a very important program and sends a signal of how important it is so that we can continue to attract the best technology to the state to deploy that. Finally, we have $20 million that would be allocated to the department to establish and administer a new incentive and demonstration program for our state's Healthy Soils Initiative. This program is designed to incentivize the use of on-farm management practices that are designed to not only mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, but also to sequester carbon and increase soil organic matter in California's agricultural soils. These programs are all on the platform of our Climate Smart Agriculture, which has been developed through the global initiative of the UN Food and Agricultural Organization. It is looking at the continued productivity of agriculture, doing it in a way that will produce the food that we need to supply the needs of an additional 2 billion people by the year 2050, and doing it with as small of an environmental footprint as possible in a changing climate. For those programs, that includes $2.5 million in 17, 18, and 20 ongoing positions to manage those programs and ensure that they're being run in the most efficient way possible. I want to finally say that we know, especially with all of the work that we're doing on climate change, as well as the work that we are charged to do under the medical marijuana program, that it requires very close collaboration with all of our sister agencies. We will succeed or fail together, and we really look forward to the ongoing collaboration that we've always enjoyed with our sister agencies and improving it to make sure that the citizens of this state get the programs that they expect from us, and we enjoy the opportunity to present to you today, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the dais? Mr. Obernolte.
Mrs. Ross, you mentioned that warmer temperatures over the last couple of winters have enabled pest populations to increase and the impacts that that's had on agriculture. Are you confident that, should we grant the budget change proposals related to that item that you're requesting, that you'll be prepared to deal with that in the future? Because the climatological projections suggest that that's going to be the norm and not the exception in the future.
Thank you for that question, because I do not want to be the Secretary of Agriculture that has our citrus sector impacted the way that has happened in other states. We've learned a lot from those states. We actually are undertaking an in-depth look at the last 10 years and projections into the next 10 years to assess how we have managed our programs and if we still have the right structure in place for the changes that are happening. We not only had the proliferation of the ACP, but last year we had 6 or 7 different species of exotic fruit flies that we know is also because we just didn't get those chill hours, but we also have the movement of more cargo coming into the state. We also are taking a close look at the kinds of pests that we're getting that are of particular interest to the tree canopy in this state. A lot of the programs that we actually are undertaking are in urban communities, like the Japanese beetle infestation that we have here in the suburbs of Sacramento right now. So we are taking a close look at that, and if necessary, we may have to ask for a budget change proposal on that, but we don't have the data now to be able to justify that. We want to make sure that we've really done this in a thoughtful way, that we've improved all of our processes to make sure that when we ask for something, it's the right staffing with the right resources to be able to go forward and make sure that we continue to protect the state from those kinds of invasive pests.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
So your agency is on the front lines on so many different issues that are present now in some form. It might get worse if we don't do something about them. I want to make sure that when you're coming to us with your budget proposals, that you're anticipating sufficiently that one or more of these issues might rise in importance and severity. Can you comment on that?
Yes, and I think last year was a perfect example of, as we saw what was happening with the high pathogenic avian influenza, in addition to the gap in funding that had occurred over multiple years of the funding to the animal lab. It was the ability to have the open communication and to collaborate with you, your staff, and the members of this committee to be able to have that ongoing communication to identify what those needs were, and that way we were prepared. I am very proud of how quickly we were able to respond. The animal lab itself, by the way it conducts the tests, gives us that early signal so that we don't waste any time. Our people, with the adjustment that we're asking for in the budget this year, will be able to do even more of that kind of forward planning. And that, in fact, is what we're trying to duplicate over on the plant health side of the business. We've had so many concurrent infestations that the planning part is where we seem to be a little bit weak right now. So that's what we're putting the data together on. And we won't hesitate to bring that back to you, to the Department of Finance, and to the Governor's office.
Great. Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Secretary.
Appreciate your attention.
There are no additional questions. We appreciate your testimony, and we'll move on now to the Transportation Agency. And Mr. Kelly is here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm happy to be here today. I'm Brian Kelly, the Agency Secretary for the California State Transportation Agency. As Secretary Laird mentioned earlier with respect to his departments and agencies, you'll be hearing from ours in the days and weeks ahead as we go through the budget process. And I know we'll have more in-depth conversations about the many BCPs and different proposals we have coming through the various departments. What I thought I would do today is give you a very high-level review of the issues that will be before you, a high-level review of the departments that are in our agency, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you, Mr. Chairman, or the members have. First, I would just note that Our agency oversees seven departments, all related to transportation policy. Our agency was founded in July of 2013. For many years, we were known as the Business Transportation and Housing Agency. With the Governor's Reorganization Plan of 2012, we became the California State Transportation Agency. We now have 7 departments under our agency. Those include OTS, the Office of Traffic Safety, California Transportation Commission, Caltrans, the State Board of Pilot Commissioners, High Speed Rail Authority, California Highway Patrol, and the Department of Motor Vehicles. In total, the budget proposals for all of these departments before you this year include a budget of $16.9 billion, and these agencies employ over 38,000 state employees to do the work in the transportation area in California. As I said, we have several important proposals that will be before the committee this year. I want to highlight just a couple of them. One, and probably the one that's garnering the most attention, is we have proposed to carry through the governor's proposal to address our deferred maintenance issues in the area of transportation with a 10-year, $36 billion proposal to invest in California's transportation infrastructure. That proposal is a combination of new revenue and necessary reforms to get greater efficiency out of our system and make sure that we are bringing all the tools we have necessary to move to invest in transportation and deliver projects in as timely a way as we can. Part of that proposal includes a $400 million proposal to move additional cap and trade revenues from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to, again, $400 million in addition to what's already there for the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Grant Program. That is a program that last year we provided $225 million to 14 different projects throughout the state of California, and we are in the second round of that program this year. We are taking applications now for additional funding and hope to make awards of those grants in August of this year. So that's an important proposal, part of the governor's transportation plan. At the agency, one element that I think is important that you'll hear about more going forward, but at our agency we're also proposing to add a position so that we can update what's called the Statewide Integrated Traffic Record System Information, also known as SWITRs. This is data and information that includes accident data that involves fatalities, injuries, and property damage. And the process now for collecting that data and how the data is shared between different related departments, CHP, Caltrans, Office of Traffic Safety, is very manual and slow, and we spent a lot of time with manpower to catch up on a backlog of that data. It's really important to keep that data current so we can apply for safety grants from the federal government, and we are proposing to do some work at the agency so that we can modernize the collection of that data and make sure we're up to date as we apply for federal grants and address safety issues in California. You mentioned the role of oversight with the legislature, Mr. Chairman. I just note that we have a request at the California Transportation Commission for just one PY, but the need for that PY is to oversee and help CTC do its expanded oversight of the SHOP program, which is developed by Caltrans, but under legislation passed last year. We asked the Transportation Commission to take a greater role in publicly vetting the SHOP program, making sure it'll meet the objectives that are stated in the program, and have public hearings about the program. So as they weigh in on that work, they'll be seeking a position to do that oversight work. Also at the Department of Motor Vehicles, a couple of things that I think are worth mentioning. One is we have a proposal in the budget this year to expand the use of self-service terminals, or SSTs. We have a group of these now that are located in DMV offices, and they enable people to do some transactions without having to go to the counter and wait in long lines, but can do them at the kiosk. Our proposal this year is to take those same SSTs and begin a process of making them available in places outside of DMV offices, like grocery stores or other places where the public goes on a routine basis, so that they can do some DMV transactions without having to go to the DMV field office. We think this is a good way of providing DMV services, particularly in places where there's not a convenient DMV office, but will also help and help reduce backlog and lines at our DMV facilities. And then finally, as this committee knows, there's been a concern the last couple of years about the structural deficiency of the motor vehicle account, and the budget will include also a proposal to raise by $10 a vehicle registration fee so that we can continue to fund the California Highway Patrol and the Department of Motor Vehicles, and essentially make sure that account does not become insolvent in the next couple of years. And so that's a key proposal to stabilize the MVA going forward. Again, Mr. Chairman, high level, top line, those are sort of the highlight issues that are in our area that will be before you. There's much more you'll see as you get into the details from each department, but with that, I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Today really does give us that very, very broad overview, and I think for those who are listening in who are not familiar with the jurisdiction of this subcommittee, you really get a good idea by hearing this testimony today about just how broad and sweeping the oversight function is that we have at the subcommittee and the budget review responsibilities that we have. So are there questions for Mr. Kelly? Mr. Obernolte?
Secretary Kelly.
Sir.
So you've said that you're going to propose to allocate $400 million from cap and trade for transit and intercity rail, and obviously we're tasked with ensuring that that cap and trade money goes to the most cost-effective uses in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And I'd be interested to hear you defend why transit and intercity rail is the most cost-effective use of that, because obviously that $400 million will be a large percentage of the money that we have to allocate this year.
Yeah. Well, first I want to be clear that this is not a new idea. Under the legislation passed 2 years ago, the allocation of 10% of cap and trade money now goes to that purpose. What we're proposing this year is to supplement what's already going to a program that we think was pretty successful last year. As I said, we ran through the first round of funding and awarded $225 million from that initial 10% for 14 projects around the state that increased transit ridership, or intended to increase transit ridership, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. When applicants apply for the program, they have to quantify, using a methodology that ARB has developed, what the greenhouse gas reduction will be from each project that they put forward. And that goes through a review process, and consistent with a series of requirements that were contained in SB 862, the trailer bill from 2 years ago. We compare these project applications to the objectives in the program that are outlined in statute. Greenhouse gas reduction is a primary consideration for these projects, and as is outlined in the bill, our proposal this year is trying to work off of what we thought was a pretty successful program in round one to do a little bit more of that. I know this committee knows, but as we work on our mobility needs going forward in the world of transportation, we know in the era of climate change we have to find ways to do more without having the same air quality impacts that we've had in the past. And we think investment in more transit and intercity rail is helpful for that objective.
Well, thank you. I'm sure we'll be having more detailed discussions about that as we get into the hearing process.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Williams has a follow-up.
Yeah, I would defend that methodology and that logic as being a real opportunity. We have a generational shift, and where you see people of certain ages, regardless of economic class, more willing to take transit, not even as their exclusive mode of transport, but in lieu of some trips. You definitely have an ability to grab some choice riders. Gas may be cheap right now, but is volatile in pricing. And when the opportunity of these times is when there are people that are willing to take transit, let's take advantage of that opportunity, and that might create some long-term effects that will reduce GHGs and frankly reduce traffic congestion. I think there are other ancillary benefits to this in urban areas, as you and I live in that are beset by traffic congestion, that this is a congestion relief strategy as well.
Just a quick follow-up to that, I would note that the legislature last year passed a bill, SB 9, which asked us to do more with the Transit Intercity Rail Grant Program and asked us to make it a bit of a longer program and to focus it on more transformational transit projects, larger projects. So that in part fed our desire to see more money go into that program so we can make that statute work.
Thank you. Mr. Obernolte.
I'll just a follow-up comment. I know we're going to be getting into a whole series of hearings as we allocate the cap and trade money, but I mean, no one, just to clarify the question that I asked, no one disputes that intercity rail and transit reduces greenhouse gas emissions. I'm just hopeful that as we have the discussion about how to allocate this money, that we'll approach it from the standpoint of the cost efficiency of that spending. So in other words, for every dollar that we spend, how many kilograms of CO2 do we take out of the atmosphere? And I think that that's a reasonable metric for comparing one expenditure that's proposed against another. And I'm going to be very interested to see how transit and intercity rail fits into that matrix.
Mr. Secretary, you should take that as a request to see that information when it time comes in our process.
I will say that I think CARB relatively soon, I'm not sure the specific date, though, is required to put out a report to all of you about the cap and trade expenditures to date, and I think it'll get into some of those issues, so that will certainly help drive the dialogue.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate your testimony this morning. Next, we have the Public Utilities Commission. I believe Mr. Picker and company are here.